So, in line with the church calendar, there are readings that this calendar assigns to us as a church. And this summer, we've kind of been on the Eras tour of the patriarchs and matriarchs. Here comes my child. Someday, when she grows up and she goes back to listen to this sermon, she will give me the biggest eye roll for slipping in a Taylor Swift joke. See, that was the real joke, by the way. Did you see how I played that? The Taylor Swift joke was just the intro, but the real joke was that my daughter will go back and listen to my sermons someday. There you go. We have been with the patriarchs the past few weeks. We've been walking with Abram, become Abraham, and his wife Sarai, now Sarah. As they've been walking with God on this journey God has invited them into. But today we go to a new era. We move from the Abraham era now into the Isaac era. But the joke is that this may be Isaac's time to shine, and yet in this story, not much is said now that it's his turn. Instead, the focus is all on his kids, and if you're a parent, you know what that's like. It's Isaac's time, but instead we hear more about Rebekah and then his sons, Jacob and Esau. And this story originally is told as a way to make sense of the origin of the Edomites, who were neighbors to the people of God in the ancient Near East. The Edomites had this love-hate relationship. There are beautiful moments in the story where Israel interacts with Edom, and they call them brother, referencing back to this Jacob and Esau origin. And yet, most of the time, Israel and Edom are not on the same page. Instead, they are clashing, much like inside of Rebekah's womb. And so this story is told to kind of give an account of where all this conflict came from these people who share space in the ancient world. And yet what I want to look at today as we begin our time with Isaac and now Esau and Jacob is the idea of calling. I wonder what you think of or what comes to your mind or rises up within your gut when I say that word, calling. A lot of the time when we're in a space like church or in worship, we use the word calling when we're talking about people who become preachers or pastors. I've been on enough Methodist committees outside of the local church to know we ask people all the time, tell us about your call to ministry. And what we mean by that is if you want to be a reverend, you better have a story. You better know that somebody is inviting you into this work. You better not be choosing it just for yourself. So we use calling as a way to set people apart, to do a special thing within the church. And yet we forget that at our moment of baptism, we are all called into ministry. That in the water and the promises that are made over children or adults, our identity and purpose are revealed, made clear to us and to the community, that God calls every single one of us into ministry, not just the people who get paid to speak on Sunday mornings. And so calling's got to be more than just for a particular group of people within the church. I wonder if you think about the word calling and you immediately think your job or your occupation. Maybe you aren't a pastor or a preacher or you don't work in a church, but whatever it is you do for 40 odd hours a week, Monday through Friday, maybe that's your calling. But that doesn't work really well if you don't like your job. If you're just doing this to pay the bills, but you're not particularly interested or moved by it, or maybe you disagree with the organization you work for or the work you do, calling gets messy then if we limit calling just to what we get paid to do, the skills we've acquired to do a job. Maybe we think calling is our deep passion, right? The thing we were made to do, the thing that really lights us up and gets us excited about getting out of bed in the morning. Maybe we don't get paid to do it, but someday we're going to get there. Or maybe you can't get paid to do that particular passion in your heart, but you know that's a calling. That's why I exist. And yet we also know that changes happen in life. And the thing we were excited about when we were 15 years old may not excite us anymore. Maybe we can't physically do the things we used to be able to do. Does that mean we don't have a calling anymore because we can't physically or emotionally connect to what we once called passion? I want to explore this idea of calling, and this morning I want to suggest to you That calling is much more than what the reverends do inside the church. Calling is much more than your occupation or your job. Calling is much more than your passion or what you think you are fit to do in this life. Calling is anything and everything in your life that you do tended in a relationship with God. Which means you have more than one calling at any given time. It's much more than the things that excite you. It's much more than the things that you get money to do. Calling is anything and everything you tend to in view of the divine. Think back on the past week we've had. Maybe you were here last Sunday, and then Monday through Saturday, you went out and encountered different people in your life, new people or people you always see. Think about the responsibilities you had to be caring for between last Sunday and this morning. Make a mental list of all the areas of your life where you show up. Maybe you spend some physical effort or mental or emotional effort. I want to suggest to you that all those things that are coming to your mind right now can be callings. And I wonder how often we take the time to think about that. That anything and everything in our life can be a calling. It doesn't have to be extraordinary. It doesn't even have to be fun or good. Callings can be difficult. Callings can be foisted upon us, whether we wanted them or not. Callings can be the everyday, mundane tasks that nobody's expecting us or counting on us to do, but we do them anyway. Anything and everything in life tended in relation with God can be a calling. What we see here in the book of Genesis, the very first book in the canon of Scripture, is we see stories about callings, beginning in Genesis 12, particularly with this man, Abram, who leaves his community. He leaves everything he knows to follow this God that he's never encountered before, this God who invites him into relationship and into a new way of being in the world. And now with Isaac and Rebekah, we are walking alongside Abraham and Sarah's children, and now their grandchildren, Jacob and Esau, who have come onto the scene. But what we see here in this passage of Scripture is we see some callings come into effect. Isaac prays to God on behalf of his wife, for she cannot conceive, which is a recurring theme here in these calling stories from Genesis. And God gifts Rebekah not one, but 2 children in her womb. All of a sudden, a calling has appeared in Isaac and Rebekah's life to be parents. And then we get this oracle, this prediction, this promise of what Esau and Jacob, these 2 children struggling in the womb, what they will become. 2 different nations, 2 different groups of people, always at odds, always in conflict, struggling. And a surprise, the younger is going to come out on top. A slight jab from the people who wrote this story at their brother's Edom across the border. We get callings about who Jacob and Esau are going to become. Callings originate as a gift from God. We don't always see them as gifts, but they do not come because of our fitness or our merits. They don't come because we were particularly ready. They come because God gives them to us as gift. And yet that doesn't mean that callings always fall into perfect place in our lives. They don't always flow effortlessly or naturally. What we see here in Genesis 25 is immediately after conceiving, Rebekah feels something going on deep within her body. The Hebrew here is not just that the children were struggling with each other. The Hebrew actually brings a picture of smashing into each other inside the womb. Like they're going to kill each other before they're even born. And so full of anxiety and agony, Rebekah inquires, goes before God and says, "What is this about? This isn't what I thought it was going to be like. Are you out there, God? Are you even listening?" And then the children are born, and we get that story of Esau coming in from his fields and encountering Jacob, who's just so happens to be cooking a stew at the perfect time. And they make this deal where Esau throws away his inheritance, his birthright, all that is supposed to belong to him by gift. And Jacob, we get introduced to him as a deceitful, nefarious individual who we call a hero of the faith. Callings are difficult. And we have this idea in our modern world that if we're doing the thing we're supposed to be doing, it'll all just flow naturally. Things will go perfectly for us. And then we worry that if we run into some challenges, we might not be in the right space. We might not be doing the right job. Maybe our kids aren't coming out the way they're supposed to. Maybe I live in the wrong neighborhood and I need to put my house up for sale. We worry that as soon as we run into some tension, we've gotten off the path. But what we see here in this story is that callings don't come without conflict. In fact, it's natural because what callings do is they push us from who we are right now and they stretch us. They put us into tension between who we are right now and who we are to become, with the reality of our situation versus what hopefully will come to us in the near future. Now multiply that by like 7 billion people in the world, and of course we're going to have conflicts with others because we're always in this state of tension between who we think we are and who we want to become, and then other people are running into our little circles doing the very same thing, and we have all kinds of conflict. Doesn't mean conflict is bad or to be avoided, it just is. And that's how the story here in Genesis reads. God isn't like dooming Israel and Esau to this horrible life together. God's just saying, this is how it is. Conflict is going to come when we are seeking out our callings. And so it might be with your job or your children or maybe your home ownership or maybe the groups you're involved with. Maybe it's taking care of a pet. Maybe it's your marriage. All of these things that we would name as callings, we know come with challenges. It doesn't mean that we're doing it wrong. It doesn't mean that God has forsaken us. It means it's part of the process. This is how we grow. Even as we tend these things with an eye toward God, it'll be hard. Doesn't mean we give up. Day by day, we take it in stride. We continue to pay attention. After all, the life of faith, most of it is about just being aware. At any given moment, in any given encounter with any kind of person, if we have an awareness that more is going on to the story, we can live faithfully into the calling God has placed in our lives. I'll give you an example. Some of us here are in that sandwich generation between raising children and now caring for older family members. Both of these don't come easily. And at least one of them are not things we usually wish upon ourselves. We don't want to see our family members grow old and need more help, and yet it is our responsibility to tend to them. We can gripe and moan and complain and pray to God that we would be delivered from this horrible thing, that it would get easier. Maybe in our worst moments, we pray for a quick resolution to the ordeal. But what if in the middle of caring for others, whatever that looks like, we ask the question, what might God be up to even now? How is God meeting me here in this time, in this place, in this particular action, with this person? All of us are called and all of us have multiple callings because life itself is a gift. It comes from God. We don't put ourselves here into this world. God gifts us existence, which means that all of our lives is touched by this divine presence. And yet so often we fail to stop and realize it. Even in the mundane things like getting up early in the morning to water your lawn in South Texas, we can trust that God will meet us there. Even in the really hard things like illness or death or divorce, it doesn't mean God caused us to learn a lesson, but God is still there working. And if we stop and we reflect and begin to pay attention, we might actually notice how God is moving and how God is inviting us to be in that space. What you see here in this story from Genesis is two approaches to callings. You get an approach of control and mastery, which we see in the sons in that birthright story, right? Esau is an innocent fellow, but he's kind of brutish in the story. He's not much better than a caveman. And so he's thinking about short term, not long term. He doesn't do particularly anything evil. He just is unaware. So he gives away the dreams and desires God has for him in order for short-term sustenance. But Jacob knows better. And yet Jacob is driven by fear, by a concern that he'll never have a place, that he won't be okay. And so he has to manipulate his brother. He has to make outcomes happen. He has to trick Esau in order to secure his standing, in order to make sure he's going to be okay in the future. But what you see in these brothers is a gripping on life, holding life like this, not willing to let go. Control, mastery. That's one way we can approach callings. It's to say, if I don't make this happen, it's not going to be okay. If I don't get this thing, if I don't get to be with that person, if I don't get rid of this person, life is going to not turn out the way I want it to. In contrast, what you get with Rebekah is real inquiry and struggle, but ultimately an open-handedness, a sense of trust about where this is all going. Now, trust doesn't mean like you let go of responsibility. You say, whatever happens, happens, and God's going to take care of it. God's got it, and I'm just going to go on autopilot. No, trust is an orientation to the way we act in life. That we can do the next right thing. We can do our very best right here, right now, but ultimately it doesn't all have to be up to me. I don't have to make it come out a certain way when it comes to my kids, comes to my job, when it comes to my retirement, when it comes to my marriage. I don't have to get it my way. Instead, I can be faithful here and now in this moment and trust that I'm not the only one involved. That God's also working, that God can see things I can't, and that God can meet me where I am, even in this place and time. That's an orientation of trust toward callings. And you can feel the difference in your life when you act out of control versus trust. You can feel the difference in your stomach, in your heart. And God invites us to trust as we live, to tend things with a sense of ease and hope. And ultimately, what the outcome of callings are is not a sense of self-satisfaction, but an experience of self-transcendence. That as we live faithfully into our callings in our lives, that it's not ultimately about me. That I'm part of something bigger in this world. I mean, obviously, that's the case with Rebekah, who literally becomes a mother, and her life has changed forever. That no longer she won't get the things she wants to do. She has to put herself behind the needs and the growth of her children. And ultimately, that's why I think as we enter into this Isaac era of the Genesis story, I think it makes sense that we don't hear about Isaac at all. Because his experience as a father and as someone who's called into the world is an experience of self-transcendence. That it doesn't matter if it's about him. It matters that he participates in something larger. That's how this whole story kicked off, that Abraham was invited into a relationship with God, not just to benefit himself, but to change the world. And as we tend to our callings with a sense of awareness and a sense of trust, what we realize is that life is a lot bigger than me. It's about we. That we move from making decisions based on my own outcomes or what I need, but instead we unite with others to do something together. We see that in our homes, in our communities, hopefully in our nation, and hopefully in the world. That callings invite us into something bigger than ourselves. I love the way that the writer David Brooks puts it. He says, happiness comes from accomplishments, but joy comes when your heart is in another. And ultimately, that's the life of God. God constantly puts God's heart into others, into you, into me, to this entire creation. God is constantly looking to the needs of others. And if we are called to be people who look like that God, who reflect that God in the world, then of course we seek to put our hearts into others. That's how we're wired. So I wonder this week, I wonder if between today and next Sunday, if you could take some time at any point, maybe at the end of your day or maybe at the very beginning, you could set aside a moment just to think about what's coming or what has transpired. And to ask the simple question, where is God in this? In this situation, in this relationship, in this experience? And maybe as we become attuned to the fact that God is always present, we can begin to trust that everything can be a calling.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Weekly Teaching. To watch the full live stream of this worship service, you can view all archived streams at the Alamo Heights UMC YouTube channel. If you have any questions, email us at podcasts@ahumc.org. That's podcasts@ahumc.org. You can also visit our website, ahumc.org, anytime. Any related links are also in this episode's show notes. Again, thank you so much for being a listener. We truly appreciate your time.